Hello, I'm Ivor Davis, and I'm a lucky guy because I got a front row seat to history, meeting and talking to some of the greatest legends in entertainment and the world at large. And along the way I took some pictures, and some of these pictures you can see, and along with the pictures there's a terrific story, and I'm going to tell you some of these stories today. So come with me on this wonderful journey which I'd like to share with you. First of all, Elizabeth Taylor was one of the great stars of Hollywood, and I was lucky enough to interview her on many movies, and I went on tour with her when she started peddling her Passion perfume. She was a character, a wonderful lady who, when she got together with the Housewives of America, felt like she was in a hen party. More about that later. And then I went up to Carmel, California, where I got together with Doris Day, star of stage and screen. And Doris was starting her own television show. And that day, her friend and co-star Rock Hudson came out, and we were shocked to see Rock Hudson looking the way he did. And then there's a time I went to Las Vegas to interview Robert Redford on a movie called The Electric Horseman. But I'm going ahead of myself, because before I met him in Las Vegas, I went to Mexico to interview Paul Newman and discovered that his young co-star was a man to watch. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey with a rock and roll group from Liverpool. John, Paul, George, and the drummer, I forget his name. You'll remember it. So follow me as we travel with the Beatles. In 1964, my editor sent me to San Francisco and said, travel with the Liverpool group on their first American tour. And I did that, and it was a ticket to ride. And one of the pictures there, which I didn't take but a friend of mine took, is with the young Ivor Davis and the even younger George Harrison. And the other picture is the only group picture ever taken of the entire Beatle group in 1964. And you might recognize me. I'm in the back row wearing a borrowed Beatle necktie. And just alongside are some of the cover stories I wrote following my unbelievable journey with the Beatles. And now let me tell you about some other stars that I met along the way. In 1975, as foreign correspondent for the London Daily Express, I covered the story of the attempted assassination of Gerald Ford. Fortunately, as everybody knows, Ford survived. He survived so that I, several years later, went to Pepperdine University, where he got an honorary degree. And if you look at that picture very closely, a friend of Gerald Ford is a guy called John Wayne, a pal of the former president. So there were presidents, and there were pop stars, and there were celebrities, and there were future kings of England that I met. And if you follow me a little bit, you will see a young man in a safari jacket who was actually Prince Charles, who is the future king of England. That's if his mother ever gives up the job. And you can see Charles when I traveled with him at Universal Studios. And along the way I met Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy sadly and tragically got executed, assassinated at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. The man who would be president, and I was actually in the kitchen to see that awful piece of history unfold. Not every piece of history was awful. There's a picture of me, the young me, with the world's most famous ballerina, Dame Margot Fonteyn. And I traveled with Dame Margot and her paralyzed husband, Roberto Arias, to Panama, where he took his seat in Parliament. There's a wonderful story that I will tell you about. And another wonderful story is the guy driving the convertible Rolls Royce is someone you may recognize. He was my chauffeur that day. He was Cassius Clay, who became Muhammad Ali. And I spent a week with Ali, writing about him. He showed me his town of LA, and I had a terrific time with Mr. Ali. And talking about heavyweight champions, another great champion is Joe Louis, known as the Brown Bomber. The picture is a bit sad because Joe Louis, a terrific fighter, had fallen upon hard times and ended up as a greeter at Caesar's palace. And if you look at that picture, look at that left fist. That was the one that disposed of hundreds or scores of heavyweight boxers. Joe was quite happy even though he was having a hard time. In 1974, Marlon Brando was a world-famous actor, a brilliant actor. Who can forget him in The Godfather and so many more movies? But Brando was also a man who had a conscience, and I went along to talk to him in this picture when he gave some of the land he had bought to the American Indians. And in this picture there is Brando and Senator John Tunney, California senator, who was the actually son of the heavyweight champion Gene Tunney. And as we move along my little cavalcade of pictures, there is Robert Stack. Robert Stack, the star of The Untouchables, a terrific actor and a friend of John Kennedy. All these people told me great stories, and some of these great stories I hope to tell you. And moving along my little cavalcade of pictures, there's another guy you may recognize, the young skipper of the Star Trek, William Shatner. And William Shatner turned Star Trek into a career, a good actor, but he will always, I mean, he's still around. He is remembered for his Star Trek epics. And finally, let's finish up with a gorgeous lady. Now, does anybody recognize this young actress? Okay. In 1968, she came from England to Hollywood, and I went to interview her. Her name, of course, Helen Mirren. And she went on, and she still is a great actress, to win an Oscar for a role as Queen Elizabeth in a terrific movie. Helen Mirren is still very thriving, and she was a talented young woman then, and she's a talented, more mature actress today. So stay with me and listen to some of my stories about life in Hollywood with my front row seat to what was happening in the last half century.